be taking a look at the massive wave of WWE releases that just went down, some more new Bray Wyatt related reports, and much more. Let's obviously start with the new, unfortunate, and devastating wave of WWE releases. This is the third massive wave of WWE releases that we've seen this year alone. And every time that a wave of releases happens, it's just a dark day for fans, for the superstars remaining in the locker room, and of course, the great talent who have lost their jobs unexpectedly out of the blue. We unfortunately had to go through another one of these dark days with this new wave of releases that included a lot of talent being let go, from massive superstars, former world champions, superstars that just got called up. This wave of WWE releases, unfortunately, had it all. Let's take a look at the full list of WWE superstars that were released this week. Karrion Kross Scarlett, Leith Lee, Eva Marie, Nia Jax, Mia Yim, Harry Smith, Frankie Monet, Ember Moon, Oni Lorcan, B-Fab of Hit Row, Zeta Ramir, Jesse Kamea, Lince Dorado, Gran Metalik, Katrina Cortez, G-Rama, Trey Baxter. There's some lesser known names in there that casual WWE fans may not know about, but there's also a lot of major names in this list of releases as well that caught everyone by surprise. So we'll be going over some of the bigger names from this wave of releases, starting off with Karrion Kross and Scarlett. It's hard to see what went wrong here for Kross and Scarlett. They came into the WWE as a part of NXT in 2020 and absolutely took NXT by storm, especially during the no fans pandemic era. Karrion Kross had such a unique presentation in NXT that made him feel like a future megastar on the main roster. He had this dark, serious persona. He had this intriguing character of Scarlett right by his side. He had this almost bigger-than-life entrance and presentation that made it really feel like he belonged in WWE. He went on to capture multiple NXT world titles and stayed a part of the main event scene for a majority of his time in NXT. Fans naturally started getting excited and discussed what Kross and Scarlett would be like on the main roster and all the possible feuds that we could see them get into over there. Well, it didn't take long for everything to go wrong. Kross and Scarlett would start to have main roster tryouts in mid-2021. But one thing that fans noticed about these tryouts is that they were split up. Kross's character and presentation was stripped away from him, and he just regularly walked for the tryout match, and it wasn't what we were used to seeing from him in NXT. Fast forward a few months, Scarlett goes missing, and Karrion Kross is called up to the main roster without her, and without any real proper direction. When Kross randomly showed up on Raw one week unannounced, and without Scarlett by his side, fans pretty much threw in the towel right away and figured it was over for him. Then fast forward a few more weeks after that, and they had Karrion Kross wearing a goofy-looking mask with his new attire. That's when fans knew for sure that it was really over. There was no coming back from that. At that point, we were all waiting for Scarlett to get called up, because having Scarlett rejoin Karrion Kross was probably the only thing that was going to get him back on track, but it never happened. Fast forward to current day, and the news just drops that they're both gone and released from WWE. And the loss of Kross and Scarlett really does hurt a lot. You look at what they were in NXT, and if WWE kept them even just a bit similar to that on the main roster, you could have been talking about a massive success, an exciting new duo that could have made a serious run in WWE, and would have been pure money. So, to see how hot they were in NXT and the mess that ended up happening there, it's hard to put any blame on Scarlett and Kross. It's obviously poor management of talent. That's where the problems are stemming from here. That brings us to another hurtful name to see on this list, Leith Lee. Every time we talk about Leith Lee, we can't help but to look at summer of 2020 and that transition he went through. Just a little over a year ago, Leith Lee was a dual champion for NXT. holding up the North American and NXT World titles after a massive win over 2019's Wrestler of the Year, Adam Cole. Then, WWE started promoting the fact that Keith Lee was coming to the main roster. Everyone was excited. The main roster has gotten an early tease of Keith Lee at the prior Survivor Series and Royal Rumble. Who can ever forget that Royal Rumble showdown between Keith Lee and Brock Lesnar? It was special, so everyone was hyped to see his main roster debut because of things like that, his prior interactions with Roman and Brock. But like we talked about even back around the time of his main roster debut, the main important question to ask for Keith Lee was if they had a story and direction set in mind for him. Well, now looking back at Keith Lee's entire main roster run, there was never any story or proper direction there at all. It was a complete mess from start to finish. The biggest moment he probably had on the main roster was the win over Randy Orton. But after that, things flattened. Then Keith Lee gets this repackaging as Bearcat. Fans were skeptical about it, but it was said that Vince McMahon was hands-on, and it was heavily invested in this version of Keith Lee. Vince McMahon being invested in Keith Lee's new Bearcat persona lasted a total of 8 days before Lee was released. And then you have a release like B-Fab. B-Fab played an important role in the success of Hit Row on NXT. Hit Row takes off and they get called up to SmackDown together as a group of 4. B-Fab made a total of 2 SmackDown appearances and instantly gets released. Sure, Hit Row has 3 members left, but you just took away one of the core members of this group that's brand new to the main roster. How does that affect the remaining members of Hit Row? It's obviously gonna have a big negative impact on them. Here they were, they all made it together in less than 2 weeks into the main roster. They're already down a member. It just has to be such a spirit crusher for them. Nia Jax was also lost during this wave of releases, but the New York Post is reporting that her release could be related to something that has nothing to do with budget cuts and is a whole other separate situation by itself. So a lot of big names lost, but on the bright side, at least they're free now. They don't have to worry about sitting in the back and going nowhere with their directions. They're free to sign somewhere where they'll be used at. We'll see how this story of all these releases continues to unfold, and if there's more to these stories. Bray Wyatt was in the headlines again for some issues related to the burnt version of The Fiend. Reports claim that Bray and WWE creative clashed over the look of the Burnt Fiend. Bray's alleged argument was that the costume was impossible to move around and work in. This ultimately ended up being the reason why the Burnt Fiend was scrapped and magically healed at WrestleMania 37. It was also reported that Bray, Randy Orton, and others were all very vocal in the lack of direction and story that their feud was going in. The WrestleMania outcome was a nightmare, with The Fiend losing his return match and splitting from Alexa Bliss all in the same night. That just seems to be the final nail in the coffin. No one knew how The Fiend would ever be able to recover from that, and he never did because that ended up being Bray's final night in WWE. It was also reported for a while now that Randy Orton winning that match was a very last-second change as well. So just complete chaos surrounding the Burnt Fiend. WrestleMania 37, and it probably ended up playing a huge role in how things went down, unfortunately. But what are your thoughts on today's stories? Leave your comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, guys.